had this like 20, 30 calls that I was doing in a matter of a few days. And one of the questions that I asked was, what do you use for payroll? And then how do you feel about your payroll provider? And I had two people out of these 20, 30 folks who told me this is the craziest thing. They told me, I use Beep as my payroll. I really dislike that service. It's absolutely terrible. And in fact, it's so terrible for me that my password to Beep is fuck Beep. So, I didn't ask people for their password, but they just wanted to tell me because they're so frustrated from their existing software. I think that the lesson learned here for product people is, just business people in general, is you got to look for the emotion. You got to look for where where people kind of come out of their way and they can absolutely love something or absolutely hate something. Everything that's in the middle is where that's the startup graveyard. That's the product graveyard where, people are just they don't care. So, the thing that always connects any two people across the company, no matter which function is the customer. So the thing that I found very, very successful and helpful in getting alignment is to get customers in the door. Go to the customer. I'm actually right now in a customer's office, by the way, doing this podcast.
That's amazing.
Welcome to Turpentine Finance, a podcast where we talk with top founders and finance leaders about what it takes to architect success. Our guests speak candidly about big business inflections, market curveballs, and how they approach decision-making so that you have the tactics and mental models for when the pressure is on. I'm your host, Sasha Orlov, founder, CEO, and self-professed finance nerd. You ready? Let's dive in.
This is going to be a fun episode. There are so many interesting conversations I think we can have today, but what I really want to filter down through is through the lens of one of the most important and precious things in life and in a startup, which is how we make decisions about time. So this is especially true in software startups because one of the most expensive things is what we build. And that's because while engineers are magical creatures, they're also kind of expensive magical creatures. And the largest influence over engineering hours is product. So it is my pleasure to introduce one of the most incredible product leaders of our time, Tomer London, co-founder and chief product officer of Gusto, the leading small business payroll and benefit software that has over 300,000 customers and the number one best payroll product on G2, Trust Radius, US News, NerdWallet, and more. So we're going to dive deep into how amazing product leaders make trade-off decisions around company goals, fundraising, launching new products, and improving existing products. So let's give some insight into you. Welcome to the show, Tomer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. So let's just start back at the beginning of Gusto, which came out of YC. How did you land on payroll?
Yeah. So just a little bit about me. So I'm Israeli. I moved to the US 13 years ago and started Gusto together with Josh and Eddie, who I met at Stanford. And the three of us have this background in small businesses that is just a part of our lives. And that's really the thing that got us to start Gusto together. I grew up in a home where my dad has a small clothing store that he runs. He's been running it for 40 years. So I've seen the day in, the day out struggles of small business owners and entrepreneurs. The two biggest things that I remember in terms of the struggles, the first one is, money stuff. In the end of the week, I remember my dad going to this back room that we had in our apartment and kind of closing the door with this calculator, remember, with these kind of notes coming out on the other end of it, and kind of making sure that, he kind of closes the week in the right way, and, how the budgets and everything, and kind of how did this week go. This was not a fun moment. When you look at his face, he was kind of really, nervous about how this week went and for that work. And then the second thing is about people. That's the probably the two most important and hardest thing in running a business, the finance side and the people side. So on the people side, I remember moments where he had like an employee he really liked, a new employee come in and doing a good job for a few weeks, and then found out through the cameras that they were stealing from the from the cashier, and how that affected him emotionally. Obviously, like, had to let go of the person and kind of run through this. So when Josh, Eddie and I connected many years later, we all shared these experiences around having small businesses in our family, and we wanted to build something to help small businesses succeed, something to help them build a great team, grow their team, and succeed as a business. So that's how we started.
And how do you, I love that. And so you have this kind of mission and vision that is beyond just payroll as a starting point. How do you land that payroll is the right kind of wedge into achieving the vision of Gusto?
Yeah, so two things. So one is the incredible pain points that we heard from talking with small businesses about payroll. And the second thing is understanding that payroll has this really unique situation where you have this wonderful data source that where you have all the data about the employees, that the data has to be precise, accurate, because that's where taxes come from. That's where payments come from. So the idea was like, well, if we really focus on this problem and do it really, really well, solve the problem really well, we have this natural system of record where there's all this employee information in. And if you have that, then you can much more, very successfully go and solve some other customer problems like health insurance, like time tracking, like employee onboarding, like everything around running your business. But I want to tell you about the problem because that's like there's a funny story there. So before starting the company, we went around and just basically talked with a bunch of potential customers, small businesses, literally calling people up from Yelp, showing up in people's in people's stores and things like that. And I had this like 20 30 calls that I was doing around in a matter of a few days. And one of the questions that I asked was, what do you use for payroll? And then how do you feel about your payroll provider? And I had two people out of these 20 30 folks who told me this is the craziest thing. They told me, I use Beep as my payroll. I really dislike that service. It's absolutely terrible. And in fact, it's so terrible for me that my password to Beep is fuck Beep. So, I didn't ask people for their password, but they just wanted to tell me because they're so frustrated from their existing software. And I think that the lesson learned here for product people is, just business people in general, is you got to look for the emotion. You got to look for where where people kind of come out of their way and they can absolutely love something or absolutely hate something. Everything that's in the middle is where that's the startup graveyard. That's the product graveyard where people are just they don't care.
So we have this, I think, really interesting kind of convergence. Something you just fundamentally know because of family. It's a pain point that you've recognized. And then at the same time, you're interviewing people and they're giving you these fun anecdotes that show there's this like really emotional hang up on this industry. So you decide on payroll. But at the same time, payroll's a very complicated piece of software. It has to be 100% right all the time. And so how do you think about something like that? It's going to take a lot of capital. How do you think about sequencing this as a wedge into a market?
Right. So when we started, we had many investors telling us yes, but we have many investors telling us no too. One of the reasons that people said no was exactly because of this. Because like, hey, payroll is so complex. Can you even build payroll software that's from scratch? That's an industry that no one innovated in for 30, 40 years, and you got to get it right. And back then, this is 2012. The lean startup was all the rage. If you remember, lean startup is this concept idea about iterating your way nimbly towards a solution, and really taking lots of small experiments along the way and launch and iterate. As an idea, it could be really good, but for payroll and compliance, it's a terrible idea. You can't launch and iterate because failure is very, very expensive, right? You can't screw up people's payroll. So we had to actually take an opposite approach, and that was very much a contrarian way of building product, which is to start by saying, hey, and we have a company value like that, which is dream big and make it real. So you start with the dream big, figure out what's the end state, what do you believe this product should do and how it should look like, and then make it real. That's like take one step at a time, and each step needs to be great on its own, and it's small, but it needs to be great on its own. You can't ship shit. And then, and obviously, payroll has to work. So that's kind of how we built a product roadmap. And then every time we had something good enough, we went and shipped it. And the way we did it was scoping every step to be self-contained, small, but it had to work and do really well for these customers. So they absolutely love it. And I can talk more about that if you want.
Yeah, I would love to. So you talk about sort of breaking this down into increments of value, but at the same time, there's a certain minimum threshold that payroll either works or it doesn't. What's the very first milestone that gives you confidence you're on the right track?
So, the very first thing that we had to figure out is, can we even build a payroll system? So we decided that we're not going to, this is while we were in Y Combinator, we decided we're not going to pay ourselves until we have a working payroll system to pay ourselves with. So we were the first people to actually get paid through Gusto. So we knew that, the payments rails work, we knew the tax filings work, and we felt, at least in the case of literally 3 individuals, right? That is very minimal in this world of minimal, lovable product, as we call it. But the first real product, I would say, that launched out to external customers, we wanted to be very, very, very focused on a narrow case that we know we can control and we know that we can do really, really well in. And if we do well there, we can keep expanding. And the first thing was, we only did payroll, so W-2 payroll, only in California, only if you didn't have benefits, only if you were salaried employees, only if you were okay getting paid 7 days late, okay? So very, very, very narrow use case. So why would anyone even choose us if we are so narrow? Well, it's because the innovation was about doing everything online through your phone and having employees onboard themselves and have the entire thing done in a delightful, easy to use way, and not through like stodgy like faxes and phone calls and things like that. So the benefit that these customers got was outweighed really all the issues in the system, or in other words, all the limitation in the system. So we found that small, narrow audience, and our goal was, let's build a product that they absolutely love. So I was on the phone with them almost every day. We wanted to make sure that they have amazing service, amazing product. And only when we felt like, and we kept improving the product with their feedback, and only when we felt we were ready, we kept expanding it to additional functionality and additional states.
So one of the choices in doing this is, it sounds like for something like payroll, there's nuances on a state-by-state basis. And then separately, you talked very specifically about starting with like W-2. So I'm imagining this is pre-COVID, so this is before the remote world. So there actually were companies that were all co-located together in the state of California. How do you think about, you have your first successful deployment with a couple customers. Do you expand to do more things in California? So you take not just W-2, but maybe 1099s or other types of workers, or do you then take this and say, I'm going to take this one narrow use case, but I'm going to go to other types of states first?
Right, exactly. So we knew that expansion to additional states just means doing the same thing with more people. So it's kind of expanding the TAM, right? Now, that's not entirely true, because some companies obviously have companies in multiple states, especially today. But when we started, I would say remote work was a fringe thing and not as much as like a big important thing, especially for the smaller businesses. So we wanted to first really figure out, for this narrow geography, how do we build a product? How do we want to expand the functionality to be in a place where we feel like this is really a really great payroll product, and only then to go and move to additional geographies. And we knew that, and the reason is, we knew that if we did it really well in California, and California is a pretty complex state from taxes, if we did it really well in California, it's going to work well in other states as well. And we've learned things along the way, but generally I would say that hypothesis was correct. And we had to make later on that there was the other thing in the back of our mind the entire time, which is like, okay, it's cool to have a full payroll product, and it's cool to move between states, to add states. But payroll is just one thing that we want to do. We want to have this all-in-one, payroll and benefits and HR and onboarding and tax credits and all these things. And when do we go and expand there? So that was another question.
Yeah, actually, that's a really good, I think, transition point to the next level of this. One of the challenges is about thinking about what's that next product. And so you have this additional complication, which is there's states. So you can build a playbook and then execute it on a state-by-state basis. That's one thing. There's expansion even within the state. And then there's other things that naturally come up, whether it be bugs or partnership opportunities along the way. So how are you thinking about all of those things and rolling out? Yeah, let's start there.
Yeah, and I think that's the deepest core question in product management is, how do you prioritize between short-term, long-term? How do you prioritize between customer segments? How do you prioritize between different business priorities, right? How do you bring it all together? So, one framework that we use extensively around that I really think makes the case, makes the thing more simple is the Horizons framework, the 3 Horizons framework. And the way we do this is think about it as like there's 3 horizons that you can invest in. Horizon 1, 2, and 3. Horizon 1 is the core business, is what's generally already working. So for us back then, it was payroll in California. Horizon 2 is expansion. So that's where you say it's the existing customer segment, but I want to expand to a different, to an adjacency. So solve another customer pain point. Or it's the same customer segment, it's the same problem, but I'm going to solve it to just a slightly adjacent customer base, right? So that would be the geography. And then horizon 3 is the moonshots. That's the crazy ideas, the new thing that comes, that's going to make a huge difference. And the nice thing about this framework is that you top down can decide based on where I am at right now in this company trajectory, how much am I going to invest in each horizon? So it could be 70, 20, 10. It could be 50, 30, 20. It kind of depends where you feel. Do we need now more big thinking innovation? We got to go, is it a bet the company moment? Or is it like, no, we got something working. We just need to really kind of make it better and better. So that's one framework that's been really, really helpful for us.
So I think this is a good transition. I'm going to jump a little out of order because I think this sets up something really nicely. One of the important relationships in thinking about making these trade-offs, whether it's 70-20, whether it's like a percent-wise or whether it's a budget-wise, is the relationship between product and finance. And that is mostly because in most startups, especially software-enabled startups, like product engineering and design can be about 80% of the operating expenses. And so this relationship with product and finance is really important. And one of the things that you mentioned was that at Gusto, that's a really healthy relationship. I'd love to hear more about how you approach this type of framework discussion with the actual core capital of the business.
Yeah, totally. So I think if you think about product management, so again, it's all about prioritization and resource allocation. Well, there's another person who cares a lot about resource allocation, and that's the CFO, right? So I think those two functions are actually tightly connected. And it's been like that since the beginning of the company, where I would say the heads of these teams were always connected. And then also within the team itself, today that we're a larger company, you have a team of, let's say, 10, 15, 20 working on a specific app or a specific experience. They have an embedded and a dedicated person from finance to work with them. And they know the product extremely well. They help build the business model and they help navigate the strategy. So product and finance are really made to work together in order to make the best decisions. The sort of conversations that happen between product and finance at Gusto are things around, for example, unit economics. Well, we want to make sure that every step of the way, let's say you have a roadmap with 10 different steps and you're really excited to get to step 10 because that's where the customers are really, really going to, it's going to blow their mind. One of the things we really care about is making sure that every single step on its own is a great product experience. So again, we don't ship bad software. It needs to be great product experience, solve customer problems. And it's healthy unit economics. We need to make sure that every step is at least unit profitable, if not more. And that's important because I think there's a graveyard of startups out there that have an amazing big vision for step 10, but never got there because the steps along the way really got them, underwater. So that's something that's important for us. That's one sort of conversation that happens. The other sort of conversation that happens is around, timing and scoping. So, you're going to get a lot of push from, if you think about the PM in the middle, the folks on the builder side, like the engineers, designers, are going to be pulling towards let's make it better. So let's add more features. Let's make it better, higher quality. There's more. We have more ideas. We don't want to ship it yet, right? And then on the finance side, again, it's kind of the opposite. It's like, well, we want to see progress. We want to see proof points that this is actually the right direction. This is the world that product management often sits in.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Quick math. The less your business spends on operations, on multiple systems, on delivering your product or service, the more margin you have and the more money you keep. But with higher expenses on materials, employees, distribution, and borrowing, everything costs more. So to reduce costs and headaches, smart businesses are graduating to NetSuite by Oracle. NetSuite is the #1 cloud financial system, bringing accounting, financial management, inventory, HR into one platform. That's one source of truth. With NetSuite, you reduce IT costs because NetSuite lives in the cloud with no hardware required, accessed from anywhere. You cut the cost of maintaining multiple systems and improve efficiency by bringing all your major business processes into one platform, slashing manual tasks and errors. Over 37,000 businesses have graduated to NetSuite, so do the math and make the move. Startup founders and execs running scaling businesses know all too well how easily their systems break down and expenses skyrocket. NetSuite is a proven way to cut costs and boost performance. And by popular demand, NetSuite has extended its one-of-a-kind flexible financing program for a few more weeks. Head to netsuite.com/zen. That's netsuite.com/zen. netsuite.com/zen. Today, I want to make a bit of a personal appeal to anyone working on a SaaS app or website. If you spend any time on the internet, you probably have interacted with chatbots in the bottom right corner of sites. Most are really annoying. AI is making them better. But still, I often just get really useless generic answers out of these and end up just wanting to talk to a real human. It felt to me like AI shouldn't just make chatbots marginally better at text responses, but that they should enable a new type of web assistant, something that feels like you're talking to a human support agent who is co-browsing alongside you. Commandbar is building that user assistant. Companies embed it into their web app, mobile app, or website, and they get a fully generative chatbot that can give personalized responses that refer to a user's past chats, perform actions directly on behalf of the user, like looking up account info, and even start browsing alongside the user to show them how to do something, like a tour guide. It can also nudge users when they seem confused or frustrated. I love when I encounter Commandbar in websites. It's white labeled, but at this point I can tell right away. Commandbar already reaches more than 20 million end users with major customers like HashiCorp, Gusto, Freshworks, 6 Sense, and more. See for yourself at commandbar.com/MOZ or follow the link in the show notes.
So to walk me through, maybe there's an example that you can think of in the past where there's sort of a discussion about how do you align on a milestone, and then how do you think about accountability after that milestone is set?
So one product and one business in Gusto I'm really excited about right now is Gusto Embedded. And Gusto Embedded, for folks who don't know, is us we took all of the infrastructure and the services that we've been building over 12 years, doing payroll for over 300,000 customers. And we made it available for other platforms like Chase, like FreshBooks, like Vagaro, and many more others that are coming, enable them to build their own payroll product for their customers. So that's a business that I think is going to be like absolutely incredible. I'm very excited to get that out with more and more partners. It's going to be bigger than Gusto.com very soon. So that was a brand new initiative. So, on one side, we've been using, again, all the services and software we built for 12 years. But on the other side is a business. It's a brand new initiative for us. So when we had that conversation internally of, okay, what's the first milestone, the second milestone, and what's what's type of a funding milestone, we used things like the T to D3, which is triple, triple, double, double, double. The idea is that when you hit $1 million in ARR, for the very least, you expect like a good growth business to triple twice and then double 3 times. Maybe in today's world it's actually triple 3 times, but you have some sort of a bar of saying this is and when you hit that, you can unlock additional budget. And we've done this interesting thing, which is across all of Gusto, we do this annual planning and biannual kind of mid-year check-ins to release additional budget and to think about our budget. But we knew that this initiative is going to have its own pace because, again, it's a brand new business within Gusto. We created this situation where they're completely independent and they get released budget as soon as they hit the next milestone. So they don't need to wait till next quarter, next year, whatever. We had specific ARR milestones, specific customer milestones, specific milestones around profitability. And when we hit them, boom, they can get additional budget and keep growing the team.
That's fascinating. So basically, you've created a whole incubation of a new business line inside. So it's a dedicated, separate team. Just for context, how many people are starting like day one?
Yeah, so day one there, I think we were around 12, something like that. That's a good, it depends kind of how you define day one. I would say the pre-day one would be like the people who came and kind of put down together the business plan and kind of the operating. And, before we wrote a single kind of additional line of code, there are probably 3 people. And we just pulled them from we pulled the best of the best out of their current jobs and asked them to go and take this on. And then that was the first, call it like seed stage. And since when that passed, by talking with the leadership team, we unlocked their budget to go and get to those 12, 13 folks. Then we put down on paper what's the Series A for them it's going to look like. And for them to get the Series A, here's the milestone. And we kept talking about these milestones as we went. And then when they hit them, we created the Series B milestones and so forth. And right now they're outside of that treadmill because they're already kind of scaling.
So you have this great thing. So they're unlocking budget as it hit milestones, not too dissimilar from a traditional venture or a YC company along the way.
Yeah.
What would be the discussion if milestones were slipping? I mean, similarly, if you're an outside of a company, like your milestone is you don't get funding, or you slip a milestone, you don't get funding, and it goes out of business. On this side, you have conviction that this is an opportunity. So
Right.
imagine there's a little bit more flexibility. But what is the discussion like if milestones are slipping?
Right. So I'll give another example. So we had a product line that I was very excited about. It's called QSERA. It's Qualified Small Employer HRA. it's an alternative to health insurance. So today, Gusto is one of the biggest health insurance brokers out there in the US. But the problem with health insurance is, as everybody knows, the cost keeps increasing. So we're always on the search of trying to figure out better mechanisms for health insurance for our companies. And one of these ideas were, it's called Qsera. And we had a team working on it. So again, we funded the team. We had milestones for them. That was more on the OKR basis as opposed to like kind of a big Series A thing. And, you know, that didn't hit the goal. So what do? You dive in, you understand why, right? And you make some changes, put down hypothesis in order to learn. And you go and you run another quarter with this. And then you see what you learned again. And then we did another quarter of this. And then we knew that, you know, if we're not hitting the traction that we want, that's both in product development traction, but also in customer experience, customer traction, then we're going to kill the product. That's what we ended up doing. Here's the pitfalls. Pitfall number one is you never kill anything because people are passionate and you just want to keep giving them another chance. And I think the thing to realize is that if you keep doing that, the issue is that you're really hurting the customers because you end up funding things that don't matter to them. So it's much better for the customer. If the customer was sitting with you in the room, they will say, just do, you know, go fix my other problems. Don't do this. So that's one pitfall. The other pitfall of like kind of killing things too quickly. And that happens again with this kind of lean startup approach sometimes because people are very excited to put down like an MVP and test things. But sometimes those tests, or often these tests, end up not really testing the real thing. It's really hard to construct a test for product market fit. You actually need to have the patience of going through a few iterations, a few cycles to make the product better before you know if it's a hit or not. So I would say these are the two pitfalls. You know, we took 3 quarters. If I look back, could we have done it in 2 quarters? Probably yes. We probably took a little bit too long, but you know, learning every day.
Awesome. So you have this plan and you have these ideas, and then a number of things can come up at any given time. And whether that be a brand new opportunity like a partnership or an opportunity or a potential threat like a competitor coming in. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of where the rubber hits the road in making trade-offs. So Gusto has what you've talked about is this expansion by state, this expansion intrastate. There's new products that you're launching. So is there a time where maybe you have a new unforeseen opportunity? So for example, partnerships can sometimes take long. It's the things that you're talking about are somewhat within your control. You decide you want to build something and you build it. And sometimes there's these partnerships and they take a long time to think about. How do you think about trade-offs between something that might be in flight and a new potentially big opportunity that comes up where you can't predict the timing?
You know, that's a great question. And I feel like I still struggle with it today, more on the M&A front. So, you know, you have an opportunity to acquire a company. And, you know, it wasn't exactly on your roadmap. It's something that you wanted to do eventually. The structure is not entirely perfect of the company you would be acquiring. So you would need to kind of make adjustment for the company in order to make this successful. And that's like the best, like I would say the most painful example I have of having these opportunities that come up and you have to say no sometimes. So I would say that's a hard one. The learnings I would say is that it's been extremely rare when something randomly comes up and that's the thing that ends up making the difference. It's the thing that usually making the difference in terms of impact on the business, on the product, are things that we had our own destiny in our hands and we decided to go for them in a proactive way. The reactive thing, whether it's reacting to competition, reacting to a partnership, an opportunity, that's just at least for Gusto, that was never a big driver and was, if anything, a distraction. So I would say right now I'm kind of I have a pretty strong filter up. I get, you know, like many people, I get a lot of emails, opportunities, and things like that, and from things, you know, that could on paper make sense, but I know that you really need that alignment across the entire company to get great work done, and that often happens through a planning cycle where everyone is aligned and we can just go.
I think it brings up a really interesting insight of what you talked about, because on one hand, there's this big industry, payroll and benefits, and it's been around for a long time, and it's dominated by these very sort of large incumbent players. And you kind of break through and become this challenger into the market. At the same time, as with any innovators, it's like you open up a market, there's copycats that come after you. And so it sort of is seen almost every YC batch and every funding round that there's some new, we're Gusto for this, or we're this, and then we're this. How do you stay focused when you have these large incumbents? They're part of a market. You have your momentum and you're challenging. And then there's these other players that have come into the market, and they come in, some friendly, saying, oh, we're taking this part of the market that Gusto doesn't, some coming directly at you and attacking. How do you think about that in your daily life?
Yeah, so I think there are markets where it's truly a very visceral 0-1. And I think like there's enterprise markets when you go and you need to win a customer and there's an RFP and you kind of go against the same 2-3 other players, and you really, really need to think about your business in terms of how are we better than the competitors? How can we do better than competitors? And I think there's some markets that are not like that. And I think the small business, specifically in mid-market, HR payroll is just an incredibly large market. There's just every single employer, there's 6 million employers in the US, and they all need solutions here. So what ends up happening there, it's much more similar to consumer, where it's really, you build a great product, a great service, and what ends up happening, at least in Gusto, what ends up happening being the biggest driver for growth is your reputation and your word of mouth. And that's very hard to fake. And so as I see new entrants coming in and copycats and things like that, I try to first learn from them. Like, what am I missing? I'm sure that there's many of them, there's really, really smart teams that are thinking through the same problems that we are thinking through. So see if I have anything interesting to learn from them. But then other than that, like, it's really just kind of playing our game and being focused on building great product and service for our customers. And I think that's been pretty successful. I would say emotionally, if you ask me emotionally as a founder, that definitely weighs on me. Like, there were times that I literally had a competitor that was literally like, I was in the building I was living, in my apartment building, that's where their office was. So every day I go down the elevator, I walk to our office, to the Gusto office, and I see a bunch of people with that brand, backpacks, and I hear their chats, and it's like, I'm very competitive. I think it's hard to find founders who are not competitive. So of course I want to win, but I feel like it's more distracting than helpful. So I try to bring in the more kind of self-control side and know not to get distracted. But emotionally, gosh, I've been thinking about competitors way too much.
Hey, we'll get back to the conversation in a moment after a word from our sponsors.
Fast forward to the end of 2024. Think about your goals. What can you do right now to give yourself the best chance of succeeding? If learning a new language is on your list, you absolutely need to check out Babbel. Babbel offers a range of learning tools, self-study app lessons, live classes, and even podcasts, which have always been my favorite way to learn. Studies from Yale, Michigan State University, and others continue to prove Babbel is better. One study found that using Babbel for 15 hours is equivalent to a full semester at college. Babbel isn't just a game to kill time and make you feel like you're learning a language. It's not overly academic or rigid either. It's all about learning language for the real world. Babbel stands out because it's designed by real people using a modern conversational teaching approach. It's not always easy, nothing worth doing ever is, but it's straightforward and designed to help you start speaking in just 3 weeks. With Babbel, I was able to brush up on my intermediate Spanish to ramp up for travel to Argentina last year, and was able to set clear goals based on how much time each week I wanted to practice. Join millions of Babbel language learners across all age groups. Here's a special limited time offer for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only at babbel.com/Torenberg. That's babbel.com/Torenberg, spelled BABBEL.com/Torenberg. Rules and restrictions may apply.
There's a world where your CRM is powerful, easily configured, and deeply intuitive. Attio makes that a reality. Attio is a radically new CRM built specifically for the new era of companies. It's flexible, easily configures to your unique data structures, and works for any go-to-market motion from self-serve to sales-led. Attio automatically enriches your contacts, syncs your emails and calendar, lets you create powerful reports, and quickly build Zapier-style automations. The next era of companies deserves more than a one-size-fits-all CRM with an outdated UX. Join 11 Labs, Replicate, Modal, and more. Try Attio instantly at attio.com. That's attio.com.
I'm sure a lot of the thinking about competitors comes a bit to a head when you're thinking about fundraising. And obviously, Gusto's been very successful at fundraising, especially in the early days when there weren't that many VCs along the way. How much do you think about having to, or how much does it play into how much capital strategy you have between all the opportunities? You mentioned there's lots of opportunities. You have no shortage of things you can continue to do. Ultimately, at some point, it's capped by the amount of money that you have, the amount of people that you actually have. And so how much does that play into fundraising strategy in either holding something back intentionally to make that part of the fundraising story or proof points sort of along the way? You've raised quite a few rounds.
I don't think we held anything intentionally, but I think we were strategic in going to market fundraising when we had like naturally a very good story. So a very good story for us is we have a product that's very loved by customers and it's growing really well. That's one. Two, we're growing it in healthy unit economics way. So that's like, we call this CAC responsible. We've had that expression since like very, very early days. CAC responsible, like responsible with CAC, as well as like healthy gross margins. We were thinking about this stuff, for a while, because we started in 2012. So that's before the craziness. So we kind of had to, and I think that's kind of connects to our personal character, like kind of personality. So yeah, so healthy unit economics and a product that people love, and then not being in a place financially that you have to raise. So being from a place of like, you're coming in, you can delay, you're not desperate. And then the last point is and there's one more thing, and that's like, hey, we are about to launch this new thing, and it's not vaporware. We have a team on it, and it's coming up soon. So I think that story has been, say in the early stages, that was very much like a good example of like the first few rounds. And then later on after that, I would say, at least my experience, and Josh, the CEO, and our CFO were definitely the people leading the charge on fundraising.
Sure.
But at least on my side, I feel like in later stages, it's much less of a story and like the charm and personality of the founders. And it's much more around like, show me your numbers. Is this a great business, right? Is this not just like great potential business, but is it already a great business, right? And that's what kind of we've been for several years now in terms of like the fundraising conversations and things like that.
How has your thinking evolved from the early days to today about CAC, being CAC responsible, or sort of being intentional about money spend and about resource requests? You talk about having this really good relationship. There's a lot of CFOs out there who are probably saying, "Oh my God, I wish Tomer was our chief product officer. I'm having a different discussion in my company." Is this just part of who you've always been because you come from as well as a background, or has this evolved over the last 10 years of Gusto?
I'm trying to think what evolved and what remained the same. I think, again, I don't know if it's like the market or it's just the maturity of the business, but we definitely, there is unit economics is one thing, but the profitability and cash flow is another thing, right? So you can be wonderfully unit economic, healthy, but still burn shit tons of money. So I would say what has changed, and that's probably just the maturity of the business. But when I look at the past few years, like 3 years probably, maybe 4, is that now when we think about sequencing, it's not just about like, hey, how many things can we do in a unit profitable way in parallel, but more like, how do we sequence things in a way that also we make sure that we're always, that we're profitable in the way that we want it to be. And that's something that is new or has been new in the past several years, at least in the kind of the world of product. Again, I'm sure that I know that Josh and CEO and our CFOs were definitely thinking about that along the way.
Yeah. So I like to generally go through and think about, all right, well, what's the other wisdom that we can share back in the lessons learned along the way? And I like to think about this in 2 ways. One, as a founder and a head of product to other heads of product, how do you maintain a healthy relationship with your finance teams? And then separately, a little bit opposite, for finance teams, how do you communicate effectively? Well, what's the insight that you would want other CFOs who might not be in a situation like Gusto to learn about how to get that relationship and maintain that healthy?
Yeah, I think I think for to be a good product leader, or even like a product professional, like you can't do it without having a deep understanding of the business and the unit economics and where things go and the potential. Like that's the basics of the job. It's not an extra, you know. So I would say, the advice to PMs is understand who is your finance partner, and if you don't have one, decide who this person is and go to them and ask them to be your finance partner, and then work with them to figure out like how do you build a good business model around what you're building, because without that, like, guess what, this thing is going to not work or get cut or something like that. And then the other side is on the finance side, I would say if you're a CFO, or if you join the finance team in a startup, like, you have way more unknowns than knowns in terms of your future compared to like very stable companies. And those unknowns often are where the R&D part of the world is. So you have to be very close and understand what's being worked on, but not just that, but also influence it. So, I would say the advice is to just understand it's just a basic requirement of the job. And then let's see if there is resistance. Let's say if you're a PM and you go to finance team, they're like, leave us alone. We're like kind of we're looking at the cash, but we don't care much about unit economics. Then I would probably say, kind of show them what it means. Like, hey, I have a question. Like, I can make this decision. Here's a trade-off I'm going to do. Can someone help me make this trade-off? And kind of bring them in. So the trade-off could be, again, 10 engineers on this, or 5 engineers, or should we do 10 engineers for 2 quarters or 5 engineers for 4 quarters? Help us figure this out. How to price this thing. Pricing is a huge one. Also where, obviously the unit economics come in, and it's really, really important. A great lever. So I would say that. Maybe one more thing that I think is kind of connects all the dots there. In the end of the day, when people join a startup, like, it's all about the mission. It's all about, we want to create a change in the world. And that change in the world is often related to the change you want to do with your customers, right? So, the thing that always connects any 2 people across the company, no matter which function is the customer. So the thing that I found very, very successful and helpful in getting alignment is to get customers in the door. Go to the customer. I'm actually right now in a customer's office, by the way, doing this podcast.
That's amazing.
Go to the customer with a cross-functional team, hear their story, understand the role you play there, understand the opportunities, listen to customer sales calls, listen to customer care calls. I've given my personal phone number to hundreds at this point of customers, and I personally onboarded the first 20 customers on Gusto, and was there on the phone with them, running every single payroll. The connection to customers is what really brings people across the company together.
I love that. Set clear milestones, define a team, and what are the trade-offs that you're making along the way. And as long as they sort of line up, then you have a healthy product and a finance team. So I think you've shared a lot of really good insights about how to make that work. And I think hopefully also displaying some of the myth that finance team is just a scary function that is there to take away from your ability to do what you think is best for the business, but this partner to help you think about what are the opportunities and the costs associated with those opportunities and making trade-offs. Tomer, this has been great. What an incredible lesson. So we sort of know where Gusto started and where it is today. Can you give us any insight to where it's going?
Yeah, well, there's tons I would want to share, but I can't. But I'll tell you what I can share. So yeah, we talked a lot about Gusto, our origin, starting with small businesses, starting with payroll only. But Gusto today is serving small, medium, large companies across the U.S. We serve employees who are across the U.S., but also even internationally today. If you're hiring an international team, we're way beyond just payroll. So it's truly an all-in-one to lead and run your team, whether it's employee onboarding and tax credits and expenses and payroll and benefits and everything around running and building and HR and building your team. So that's what we do today. And the big thing that I'm now excited about for the future is, as I mentioned, that it's Gusto embedded. So it's taking everything that we build and enabling other platforms to go and build their own payroll product using Gusto technology and Gusto service. And I think you're going to hear there's going to be a lot of news coming up with some really, really exciting big partners soon. So stay tuned to that.
Got it. And where can people learn more about Gusto and find you?
go to gusto.com and check out what we do. And if you want to connect with me personally, if you're a customer, you want to talk, you have feedback, you have ideas, just go on Twitter at Tomer London, and we can chat over there as well.
Thank you, Tomer, so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to Turpentine Finance. Share it with your executive team, direct reports, friends, and family. And if you want to support the show, the best ways are to leave a review wherever you're listening and subscribe. Turpentine Finance is part of Turpentine, the podcast network behind Moment of Zen, Turpentine VC, Age of Miracles, and more. Shows for experts by experts in tech.